He bought a 50-cent stone mansion. Then his dog found a secret that shocked everyone. The wind whipped across the empty stretch of County Road 19, carrying with it the smell of frost and iron. Nathan Cole tightened his grip on the steering wheel as his old Ford rattled to a stop before the wrought iron gate. Beyond it, the mansion rose like something out of another century. 3 stories of pale stone, shutters sagging, ivy clinging to the cracks. He'd seen the photo in the county file, but the picture hadn't shown the weight of it, how it seemed to press down on the ground itself. 50 cents. That was what the property had cost him. A clerical mistake, they said. A relic from a tax auction no one had bothered to contest. He had signed the paperwork almost out of irony. 50 cents for 4 acres and a mansion that time had abandoned. But as he stepped out of the truck, boots crunching against gravel, the air felt wrong. Too still, too heavy. Atlas jumped down from the passenger side and froze. The shepherd's coat gleamed copper under the weak winter light, every muscle drawn tight. His ears flicked forward, nose twitching. Nathan watched him carefully. That dog had walked him through IED fields and fire zones without a single misstep. Atlas didn't freeze for nothing. "You smell something?" Nathan asked softly. Atlas didn't move. His paw lifted halfway, suspended like a warning. Nathan exhaled and shoved open the gate. The hinges screamed. He walked the path up to the porch, the boards warped from years of neglect. When he touched the door handle, it was cold, metal that had no business being that cold under a midday sun. He slipped the key from the envelope the county clerk had given him, the one sealed with a polite smile that had seemed rehearsed. The lock turned easier than it should have. The door swung open without a sound. Inside, dust floated in thin shafts of light, cutting through cracked shutters. The air smelled stale, but not rotten. There was no mildew, no mold. It was the silence of something that had stopped in motion. A coffee cup sat on the counter, faint brown ring at the bottom. In the fireplace, the ashes were pale, but still held shape. Someone had been here, not long ago. Atlas stepped past him, nose to the ground. His tail hung low, the fur on his neck bristling. He moved slowly, methodically, sniffing along the baseboards, pausing at the edge of the living room where the stone met old oak. Nathan followed, scanning the space, peeling wallpaper, faded carpet, a chandelier that swayed ever so slightly though the air was dead still. "Guess it's just us now," he muttered. But even his voice sounded swallowed. Atlas stopped at the foot of the staircase. His body stiffened. The low growl that rolled from his chest was deep, controlled, the kind of warning that came before danger showed itself. Nathan's instincts kicked in, the quiet focus, the awareness that had never left him since the desert. His right hand reached for a sidearm that wasn't there anymore. He crouched instead, hand brushing the shepherd's shoulder. "What is it, boy?" Atlas didn't blink. His eyes locked on the top of the stairs, head tilted, nostrils flaring. Nathan listened. Nothing. No footsteps, no movement, just the house breathing slow through its cracks. Then a sound, a single, dull thump from upstairs. Not loud, but sharp enough to split the silence. Nathan straightened, pulse quickening. "Stay," he ordered. Atlas ignored him, taking one cautious step up the stairs. The wood creaked under his weight. Nathan followed close behind, flashlight drawn from his coat pocket. The beam cut across peeling paint, portraits coated in dust, and a long hallway lined with doors half open. At the end of the hall, something glinted on the floor. A small metal object. Nathan crouched, sweeping the light closer. A button. Brass, military issue. He turned it over. The inscription read, E. Langley. The name tugged at something distant in his memory. Langley, the former mayor who had vanished 2 decades ago. Nathan pocketed it, unease creeping in. Atlas barked once, sharp and sudden. Nathan spun toward him. The shepherd was standing by a door at the far end, paw scratching lightly at the frame. His ears were rigid now, head cocked to one side. Nathan's throat tightened. He reached for the knob and twisted. The door opened to a bedroom frozen in time. The bed was made, sheets crisp with age. A clock on the dresser had stopped at 11:47. And there, on the vanity, a half-burned candle sat in a pool of wax that hadn't yet gathered dust. Nathan's breath fogged the air. "Who the hell's been here?" Atlas moved to the far wall, sniffing hard along the baseboard. Then he pawed the paneling once, twice, harder the third time. A hollow echo replied beneath the plaster. Nathan's nerves pricked. He dropped to his knees, tapping the wall. The sound was uneven, wood over empty space. "Attic or crawl space, maybe," he murmured. Atlas barked again, insistent, then backed up a few steps, gaze locked on Nathan. The dog wanted him to see. Nathan found a hairline seam running vertically beside the dresser. The paint was newer here, smoother. He pressed gently. The panel flexed. A breath of cold air seeped out. "Jesus," he whispered. He shoved harder. The panel gave, snapping open with a muted crack. Behind it, a narrow passage disappeared into black. The smell was dry, metallic, old. He raised the flashlight. Stairs led down, not up. A basement entrance hidden behind a bedroom wall. Atlas stood at the threshold, fur lifted, head low. Nathan's heartbeat thundered in his ears. "You really want to go first, huh?" he said. Atlas didn't wait. The shepherd stepped forward, one careful paw at a time, body taut like a drawn wire. Nathan followed him down. The air thickened with each step. Dust coated the walls, but the steps were clean. Someone had used them, recently. At the bottom, the narrow corridor opened into a small room. Shelves lined the walls, each filled with old metal boxes, folders, and something that looked like maps. A single lamp stood on a desk, unplugged. Nathan brushed the dust from one of the boxes and froze. Every label bore the town's seal. Property deeds, survey records, names of families he recognized, people whose houses had been demolished decades ago to expand Ashvale's northern district. He flipped open the nearest file and saw signatures, one of them familiar, his father's. Atlas whined softly behind him. Nathan turned. The shepherd's gaze was fixed on the staircase. His tail stiffened, ears flattened. Then came the sound. Footsteps. Slow, measured, descending the stairs they'd just walked. Nathan killed the flashlight. The room plunged into darkness. He dropped to one knee beside Atlas, hand pressed to the dog's chest. Atlas didn't make a sound, but Nathan could feel the vibration of a growl deep under the fur. The steps stopped halfway down, then turned, retreating. A door closed softly above. Nathan didn't breathe for nearly a minute. When he finally did, it came shaky. He looked at Atlas, who stared back, eyes wide, unblinking. "Looks like we're not alone," he whispered. Atlas's tail twitched once, not fear, but readiness. Nathan straightened slowly, the file still clutched in his hand. "All right, boy," he said under his breath. "Whatever's in this house, we're going to find it." Atlas pressed close to his leg, steady as stone. The two of them stood in the dark, surrounded by secrets waiting to be unearthed, and the faint echo of footsteps fading into the walls that shouldn't have remembered. The next morning broke grey and cold. Mist hung low over the trees behind the mansion, curling like smoke from a fire that refused to die. Nathan brewed coffee on a camping stove he'd set up in the kitchen. The old gas line was too risky to use. The sound of the percolator filled the silence. Small, domestic, almost normal. But nothing about the house felt normal anymore. Atlas hadn't slept. The shepherd had stood by the living room arch most of the night, eyes fixed on the staircase. When Nathan finally drifted off near dawn, he'd woken twice to the sound of claws against wood. Soft pacing. Back and forth. Back and forth. Now the dog stood by the wall near the foyer, ears pricked, head tilted. His gaze was locked on the plaster as if it were breathing. "You're hearing ghosts," Nathan said, rubbing the back of his neck. His voice sounded rough, like gravel in the cold air. "We both need rest." Atlas didn't move. His tail hung low, but his body stayed taut, ready. Then he growled, quiet but deep, like something remembering how to speak. Nathan froze. The sound was different from a warning bark. It was more like recognition. The dog wasn't afraid. He was certain. "You hear something?" Nathan whispered. He stepped closer, placing his palm against the wall. It was cold, the kind of cold that felt deliberate. He leaned in, ear to the surface. Nothing but stillness. He knocked once. The echo came back hollow. Atlas's nose pressed against the baseboard. He sniffed, pawed once, then again, claws scraping the plaster. Nathan knelt beside him, inspecting the molding. Paint dust flaked under his fingers. One section felt slightly raised. He pushed harder, and a faint crack appeared. "That's not original construction," he murmured. Atlas barked once, sharp enough to make the room vibrate. Nathan pulled his hand back, then sighed. "All right, you win." He went to the truck for his crowbar and returned, kneeling where Atlas stood guard. The shepherd backed up a step but didn't take his eyes off the wall. Nathan wedged the bar under the baseboard and pried. The wood gave with a groan, revealing a seam of darker material behind it. He peeled away more plaster until a hidden panel emerged, small and square, barely wide enough to crawl through. Cold air spilled out, thick and dry. Atlas stepped forward, nose twitching. He sniffed once, twice, then looked back at Nathan with that focused stillness only war dogs have, the look that said, "This matters." Nathan aimed his flashlight into the gap. The beam slid across stone steps leading downward, steeper than the cellar they'd found before. "Another basement?" he muttered. "How many layers does this house have?" Atlas was already moving. "Hey, wait!" Nathan hissed, but the dog disappeared into the darkness. He followed, the flashlight shaking slightly in his hand. The air turned colder the deeper they went, smelling faintly of metal and dust. The stairs ended in a narrow room, unfinished stone walls, wooden beams blackened with age. Atlas stood at the far end, paw resting on a stack of old boxes. He barked once, sharp and deliberate. Nathan moved closer and crouched. The top box had split open, its contents spilling across the floor. Mildewed papers, rusted tools, a single photograph curling at the edges. It showed a man in a military uniform standing in front of this very house, decades younger, smiling faintly. Nathan flipped it over. No date, no note. Just the embossed town seal of Ashvale. He reached for another box, smaller, sealed tight with rusted latches. The metal snapped as he forced it open. Inside, neatly folded, was a wool jacket. Green military issue, well preserved despite the dust. He lifted it out carefully. Across the inside collar, stitched in faded thread, were the letters. E. Langley. Nathan stared at the name for a long moment, the sound of his own breathing loud in the small space. The name wasn't just familiar, it was infamous. Edward Langley, the town's last elected mayor before the scandal. The man who'd vanished in 1998 after accusing the county of embezzlement and land theft. Official reports claimed he'd drowned in the quarry east of town. No body ever found. Nathan's hands trembled slightly as he laid the jacket across his knees. "How the hell did this end up here?" Atlas moved closer, sniffing the fabric, then sat back with a low whine. His ears flicked backward, uncertain but not fearful. Nathan recognized that sound. It wasn't confusion. It was memory. The dog had caught a scent older than both of them, something that lingered too long to be chance. Was he here? Nathan asked quietly. Did he live here? Atlas's tail brushed the ground once, slow. He stood, turned toward the wall, and barked again, short, insistent. Nathan followed his gaze. On the stone behind the boxes was something faint, carved into the mortar by hand. He wiped away the dust. The letters spelled out two words, "Not done." A chill ran through him. He looked back at the jacket. The pockets were empty, except for a folded scrap of paper tucked deep inside the lining. Nathan unfolded it slowly. The writing was almost illegible, ink smudged by time. Only fragments remained. "They're coming. If I don't make it, the house will tell." The house will tell. Atlas growled again, soft this time, almost under his breath. Nathan's flashlight flickered. For a heartbeat, the shadows around them seemed to shift. He turned the light upward and froze. High above, near the ceiling, a ventilation duct was cracked open. Dust hung in the air below it, disturbed recently. Someone had been down here. "Come on, boy," he said, voice low. "We're done for now." As they climbed the stairs, the air grew warmer, but the unease didn't fade. Nathan sealed the panel behind them, covering the gap with a plank. He couldn't shake the image of the jacket, the words carved into the wall, the scent that made Atlas restless. Back upstairs, he sat at the kitchen table, hands clasped around a mug of cold coffee. Atlas lay nearby but didn't rest his head. His eyes stayed fixed on the doorway, body tense as if expecting something to move. Nathan stared out the window towards the woods. "They said you were gone," he whispered. "But you left something here, didn't you?" Outside, the wind shifted. The trees groaned against each other. Somewhere deep in the house, a door clicked shut on its own. Atlas rose instantly, ears up, tail stiff. He looked at Nathan and gave a low bark, question, command, warning, all in one. Nathan stood slowly, his pulse steady but high. "I hear it too." The light above them flickered, then steadied. The house went still again. Atlas circled once, lying down with his head between his paws, but his eyes never closed. Nathan sat back down, the sound of the wind pressing against the walls. His mind raced with questions that had no place in daylight. Who built this house? Why hide a mayor's jacket? And why sell a mansion worth millions for 50 cents? Atlas shifted, letting out a quiet exhale. It sounded almost like agreement. Nathan looked at him. "You knew something was wrong before we even walked in, didn't you?" The shepherd's ears twitched, eyes glinting amber in the dim light. Nathan leaned forward, whispering, "Then I guess we keep digging." Outside, the clouds began to break, a sliver of light cutting through the trees. Inside, the air stayed heavy, waiting. Atlas's gaze moved back to the wall they'd just sealed, his chest rising slow, steady. The dog hadn't forgotten. Neither had the house. Ashvale looked peaceful from a distance. Rows of old oak trees, a white church steeple, brick buildings that seemed untouched since the 70s. But as Nathan drove down Main Street that morning, he could feel the quiet resistance in the air, like the town itself was holding its breath. The bell over the diner door jingled when he walked in. The place smelled of burnt coffee and maple syrup. Conversations paused, just for a second, before the locals went back to pretending they hadn't noticed him. Atlas followed at his heel, his tags clinking softly. "Morning," Nathan said to the waitress behind the counter. She looked to be in her 60s, silver hair tucked under a red scarf, her smile polite but tight. "Morning." she replied. Coffee? Black, and maybe some answers if you've got those on the menu. That earned a faint smirk. She poured his cup and leaned an elbow on the counter. You're not from around here. Bought the old Langley place, Nathan said. Stone mansion by the ridge. The woman froze, just a fraction, but enough for him to notice. That house should have stayed empty, she said quietly. You knew the Langleys? Her eyes flicked toward the back booth where two men were pretending not to listen. Everyone knew him. Mayor Edward Langley ran this town once, straight as a plumb line until he started asking questions he shouldn't. What kind of questions? She hesitated, eyes darting to the window. Land records, development permits. He said the council was funneling property tax into private accounts. A week later, he disappeared. Sheriff said he drowned in the quarry, but no one ever saw a body. Nathan felt Atlas's tail brush against his leg. The shepherd was sitting upright, ears pointed at the back of the diner, as if listening to a different conversation entirely. The woman poured more coffee, though Nathan hadn't touched his. People round here learned not to say his name too loud. Trouble follows it. A low male voice came from behind Nathan. She's not wrong. Nathan turned. A man in a brown deputy's uniform stood near the door, one hand resting casually on his belt. His badge read, Jensen. His face was lined and pale, eyes steady but tired. You're the one who bought the mansion? The deputy asked. That's me. Jensen nodded slowly. You should leave it the way you found it. That's not really my style. Then you should know what you're walking into, Jensen said. He sat down across from Nathan without asking. Langley wasn't crazy. He had proof. But around here, proof doesn't always mean safety. Nathan studied him. You believe he was killed. I believe, Jensen said, voice low, that people don't just vanish after accusing half the county of fraud. He looked at Atlas, who had risen to his feet, body rigid. That dog's seen more truth than most of us ever will. Nathan leaned in. Then why hasn't anyone done anything? Jensen's jaw tightened. Because every man who tried ended up in the quarry or moved away before sunrise. You want my advice? Don't go digging? Nathan met his eyes. Digging's kind of what I do. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Jensen stood, tugging his hat lower. You're new, so I'll say this once. People who die in Ashvale don't always die on their own. And if that dog starts barking at shadows again, listen to him. He left without paying for his coffee. Nathan sat in the heavy silence that followed. The waitress avoided his eyes. Outside, the wind picked up, scattering dry leaves down Main Street. Atlas pressed his nose to the window, watching the deputy's truck pull away. Back at the mansion, the air felt heavier than before. Nathan spent the afternoon in the cellar, spreading out the old files and jacket he'd found. The name stitched inside still burned in his mind. E. Langley. His father's name, Monsieur Cole, was on one of the land permits in the pile. He didn't remember his father ever working for the town. Atlas prowled the basement restlessly, tail flicking, nose close to the ground. Suddenly he stopped at the far corner near the furnace, pawing at the dirt. The sound echoed through the quiet room. Scrape, scrape, then a dull thud. Nathan crouched beside him. You've got something? Atlas kept digging, claws tearing through the packed soil. After a few minutes, the corner gave way to a small wooden box, edges rotted but intact. Nathan brushed off the dirt, pried it open, and froze. Inside lay a photograph of Langley standing beside another man, his own father. Behind them was the same mansion. Beneath the photo was a folded sheet of paper, an old survey map marked with circles and arrows, each labeled with dates. One red X sat directly over the coordinates of the house they were standing in. Nathan stared at the map. This place was part of the development project. Atlas let out a sharp bark, tail stiff, his nose pressed to the box again. There was something else buried beneath the papers, a metal key, tarnished and heavy, engraved with the number 12. Nathan turned it over in his hand. "What the hell were you two hiding down here?" Atlas's ears flicked back toward the stairwell. The hairs on his neck rose. Nathan froze, listening. Above them, the floorboards creaked. Slow, deliberate, one step at a time. "Maybe the house isn't as empty as we thought," Nathan whispered. Atlas growled low in his throat, not fear, but warning. Nathan reached for the flashlight, killing the beam until they stood in near darkness. He counted the footsteps. 3, then silence. Whoever it was had stopped right above them. He waited. The sound came again, moving toward the back of the house, fading until it disappeared completely. Only then did Nathan exhale. "They know we're looking." Atlas moved closer, pressing his shoulder against Nathan's leg, his breathing steady, controlled. The dog's instincts had never failed him before. Nathan folded the map carefully, sliding it into his jacket pocket. "All right, boy, let's see what else this town forgot." As they climbed the steps back into the light, the air felt colder, sharper, like the house itself had been listening. Outside, the clouds gathered low over the ridge, and somewhere beyond the trees, a truck engine started and drove away slowly, too slow to be random. Atlas looked back towards the woods, ears forward, eyes burning gold in the dim light. He hadn't forgotten the sound of those footsteps. And neither had the house. The night had settled over Ashvale like a sheet of smoke. Wind whispered through the pines outside the stone mansion, rattling loose shutters. Inside, the old house creaked and breathed, every sound magnified in the quiet. Nathan sat at the kitchen table, staring at the map Atlas had unearthed earlier. The red X marked the exact ground beneath this house. He traced the lines again and again, as if repetition could force sense out of the chaos. Atlas paced the hallway beyond the kitchen, nails tapping against the floorboards. He hadn't stopped moving since dusk. Every few minutes he would stop at the end of the corridor, nose pressed to the wall, tail stiff. Nathan thought it was nerves. Maybe the dog was reacting to his own unease, but the pattern was too deliberate. Atlas was listening to something Nathan couldn't hear. "Easy, boy," Nathan said softly. "It's just the wind." Atlas ignored him. He barked once, sharp, at the wall. The sound bounced through the hallway, then faded into the dark. Nathan stood, flashlight in hand. What now? The shepherd's gaze was fixed on the far end of the corridor, where the plaster bowed slightly under years of settling. Nathan approached, running his hand across the surface. Cold. Too cold. His palm caught the edge of a faint seam, vertical, almost invisible. The same kind of seam he'd found behind the bedroom wall. He exhaled slowly. "You've got a good nose, I'll give you that." He pressed against the seam. Nothing moved. He tried again, harder. Still nothing. Atlas backed up 2 steps, barking again. Nathan grabbed a hammer from his tool bag and struck near the baseboard. The plaster cracked, revealing dark wood beneath. Another hit, then another. A hollow thud answered him. "Son of a—" He wedged the hammer under the edge and pried. The panel gave way with a deep groan, swinging inward to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness. A second basement. Atlas stepped forward immediately, tail lowered but unwavering. Nathan clicked on his flashlight. "If there's another corpse down there, you're explaining it to the sheriff." He started down, the beam cutting through layers of dust and cobwebs. The stairs spiraled tighter than the first basement, lined with stone that glistened faintly under the light. At the bottom, the passage opened into a chamber larger than he expected. Metal shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling. On them were hundreds of folders, rolled blueprints, and binders stamped with the town's seal. The air smelled of old paper and oil. In the center of the room sat a drafting table covered in maps, each sheet marked with signatures. Nathan moved closer, shining the light across the documents. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. One signature stood out, E. Langley. He turned another page. Monsieur Cole. His breath caught. His father's name. Miles Cole, senior surveyor for Ashvale's Department of Development. He hadn't thought of his father's old job in years. The man had disappeared when Nathan was 12, gone on a contract project, and never returned. His mother had died believing he'd simply walked out. Nathan's pulse pounded in his ears. He lifted one of the blueprints and recognized the same coordinates from the map Atlas had found. The land beneath the mansion wasn't just part of Langley's investigation, it was the epicenter. "Dad," he whispered. Atlas moved along the shelves, sniffing methodically, pausing at one spot near the far corner. He barked once, low and deliberate. Nathan followed, crouching beside him. A single drawer sat half open, dust-free. Inside were black and white photographs, Langley standing with a team of engineers, one of them unmistakably Miles Cole. They were shaking hands beside a newly poured foundation. The back of the photo bore a handwritten note. Ashvale Drain Project, Phase 2, do not file. Nathan's throat went dry. The drain project was supposed to be abandoned decades ago after sinkholes destroyed part of the quarry. So why were the records hidden here? He set the photo down and turned towards the table again. Beneath a stack of maps lay a sealed envelope, brittle with age. He opened it carefully. Inside was a short letter, written in the same precise hand as Langley's earlier notes. To whoever finds this. Miles was right. They moved the bodies before the inspection. I'm leaving the rest here. If I don't make it, tell my son to finish what we started. Nathan's chest tightened. The air seemed to drain from the room. He sank onto a stool, letter trembling in his hands. Bodies? He muttered. What bodies? Atlas whined softly, brushing his head against Nathan's arm. The gesture grounded him. Nathan closed his eyes for a moment, inhaled, then steadied his voice. We're in something big, boy. The sound that followed made his skin crawl. A faint thud from upstairs. Not the wind. Heavy, deliberate, like a boot step. Then another. Atlas froze, muscles locking, nose lifted towards the ceiling. His growl started low and climbed into a deep rumble that filled the basement. Nathan switched off the flashlight. The room sank into pitch black. He could hear the house settling, the faint whine of air through old vents, and then the distinct creak of the front door opening above them. Someone was inside. He crouched beside Atlas, hand resting on the dog's shoulder. Quiet, he whispered. The shepherd went still, his breathing controlled. Together they listened. Footsteps crossed the floor above, the slow, confident pace of someone who knew the layout. Nathan's mind raced. If the intruder found the open panel, they'd know he'd been digging. He grabbed the letter and slid it into his jacket pocket, then pressed the panel door closed as quietly as possible. Darkness swallowed them completely. The footsteps reached the top of the hallway, then stopped. For a long, breathless moment, the world held still. Nathan could feel Atlas trembling, not from fear but anticipation. The dog's ears tracked the faintest sound, head turning toward the stairwell. The intruder shifted above them. Wood creaked. Something heavy scraped across the floor. And then, in a voice too calm for the hour, a man spoke. Just one word muffled through the floorboards. Nathan. The air left Nathan's lungs. No one in Ashvale should have known his name. Atlas let out a low, guttural growl, pressing closer to Nathan's leg, eyes fixed upward. Nathan clenched his jaw, forcing his breathing steady. Whoever was up there wasn't guessing. They knew exactly who he was and what he had found. The footsteps turned toward the door. The front hinges squealed once, then silence. Minutes passed before Nathan dared move. He exhaled, hand still on Atlas. "We're not imagining it," he whispered. "Someone's watching." Atlas's tail thumped once against the floor, not from comfort, but resolve. Nathan switched the flashlight back on. The pale beam flickered over the shelves of stolen history. The signatures, the letters, the maps that now linked his father to a mayor who died for the truth. He straightened slowly, his face set, the exhaustion replaced by something colder. "If they think they can bury this," he said under his breath, "they picked the wrong house." Atlas raised his head, eyes bright, stance ready. The dog's chest rose and fell in quiet rhythm, a soldier waiting for his command. Above them, the house groaned once more, as if it too remembered what had been done here. The night had barely thinned when Nathan woke to the sound of creaking above him. It wasn't the soft settling of old beams. This was heavier, measured, like someone walking from room to room. He reached for the flashlight by instinct, heart pounding steady and slow. Atlas was already up, his body rigid, nose lifted toward the ceiling. The footsteps stopped. Nathan moved quietly down the hallway, the old floor groaning under his weight. The beam of light swept across the walls, catching flakes of dust dancing in the cold air. Atlas followed, every step silent but tense, his breath shallow. At the far end of the hall, a shadow flickered across the doorway, broad shoulders, a shape of a man. Nathan froze. "Who's there?" No answer, just the soft sound of leather shifting. Nathan flicked the flashlight upward, and the beam caught a familiar face. Deputy Carl Jensen stood by the window, one hand raised slightly in surrender, the other resting near his belt. "Easy," Jensen said, his voice low, gravelly. "I didn't mean to scare you." Nathan didn't lower the light. "You broke into my house." Front door was open. Jensen's gaze dropped to Atlas, who stood in front of Nathan, blocking him instinctively. "Smart dog. Knows who to trust?" "That depends," Nathan said. "You planning to give me a reason?" Jensen looked older than he had at the diner, paler, eyes sunken. "I came to finish what Langley started, and what your father died for." The words hit harder than Nathan expected. "You knew my father?" "I worked with him, briefly. We were supposed to inspect the drainage tunnels after the town signed off on the development project. Miles Cole found something in those plans, something that didn't match the public maps." Jensen took a slow breath. "The council ordered the inspection to be buried. They sent me and a few others to make sure the files disappeared. Langley wouldn't let it go. Next thing I knew, he vanished. A week later, your father did too." Nathan's grip on the flashlight tightened. "You're saying he was killed?" Jensen nodded once. "Buried along with the truth." He glanced toward the floor, guilt crawling across his expression. "They said if I didn't play along, my family would pay for it, so I did. And I've been living with that ever since." Atlas growled softly, a sound that seemed to rumble through the walls themselves. Jensen's eyes flicked to the dog again. "He's got good instincts. He knows I'm telling the truth." Nathan hesitated. Part of him wanted to believe, the other part had been burned too many times by half-confessions. "Why now?" "Because the man behind it all isn't done." Jensen reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small metal key, tarnished with rust. "This opens a lockbox hidden in the east quarry, behind the maintenance shack. Langley's final evidence. I kept it there for years, afraid to touch it." He held the key out. Nathan didn't take it immediately. "Why not give it to the feds?" Jensen gave a dry laugh. You think they don't already know? Half the people involved still draw paychecks from the state. You'll have to dig this one out yourself. Nathan took the key. The metal felt heavy, cold. If what you're saying is true, this could expose everyone who... He stopped. A faint sound came from outside, the crunch of gravel under tires. Jensen turned toward the window. Headlights flashed briefly across the far trees, then vanished. You expecting company? Nathan asked. Jensen's jaw tightened. No, and that's why I have to go. He started toward the stairs. Be careful, Nathan. They'll know you have that key. Who's they? But Jensen was already halfway down the steps. Atlas followed to the landing, ears flattened, growling low. Nathan leaned over the railing, watching the deputy slip out the front door into the fog. The house fell silent again, but the tension didn't leave. By morning, the world had turned grey. Nathan and Atlas drove east toward the quarry, the key still warm in his pocket. Mist hung low over the ridgeline, and the radio crackled with static. About halfway there, they saw the flashing lights, a patrol car sideways across the narrow road, smoke curling from the hood. Nathan slammed the brakes, heart dropping. He jumped out, Atlas right behind him. Jensen's cruiser was mangled against a tree, the windshield spider-webbed. The deputy was slumped over the wheel, blood dark against his shirt. Nathan yanked the door open, but the smell hit him first. Gasoline, strong and fresh. Carl, he said, shaking the man's shoulder. No response. The man's eyes were open but empty. Atlas circled the car, nose low, hackles raised. He stopped by the rear tire, pawing at the dirt. Nathan crouched beside him. The soil was slick, stained with fuel. The tank hadn't ruptured in the crash. It had been punctured, deliberately. This wasn't an accident. Nathan muttered. Atlas growled, nose following a faint trail leading away from the wreck, toward the tree line. Nathan followed a few steps before stopping. The path ended at a set of fresh boot prints. Whoever had done this had been waiting. Nathan returned to the car and closed Jensen's eyes. The man's hand still clutched a folded note, half burned by heat. Nathan pried it free and read what was left. Only 3 words remained legible. Trust the dog. He looked down at Atlas. The shepherd's gaze was locked on the forest, body tense, tail still. Nathan pocketed the note. We'll finish it, Carl. A cold wind swept through the trees, carrying the faint smell of oil and pine. Nathan stood beside the burning wreck, the key still in his hand, the fire reflecting in Atlas's eyes. The deputy's death wasn't random. It was a message. Come on, boy, Nathan said quietly. Looks like we're headed to the quarry. Atlas stayed close as they walked back to the truck, every step echoing on the empty road. Behind them, smoke rose into the pale morning sky, twisting like a ghost that refused to fade. Nathan didn't look back, but Atlas did. Once, briefly, ears flicking toward the distant crack of a branch, snapping in the woods. Someone was still out there, watching. And for the first time, Nathan realized this fight wasn't about what was buried in the past. It was about what someone was still willing to kill to keep hidden. The road to the eastern quarry cut through the woods like a scar, narrow and forgotten. Nathan drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the cold key Jensen had given him. The clouds hung low, heavy with rain, and every turn seemed to lead deeper into a silence that didn't belong to nature. Atlas sat upright in the passenger seat, ears twitching, eyes fixed ahead, as if he already knew what waited for them. They reached the locked gate just after dusk. The sign hanging crooked on the chain read, Property of Ashvale Minerals Cult, closed since 1999. Nathan got out, cutting through the rusted link with a crowbar. The wind rushed through the gap like a warning. Stay close, he murmured. The quarry sprawled below them, an open wound of rock and shadow. Pools of black water reflected the last scraps of daylight. Machinery lay rusting under tarps, and the smell of oil and rain mixed in the air. Atlas trotted ahead, nose to the ground, moving with purpose. Every few steps he stopped, sniffed, then kept going. At the base of the pit, they found a maintenance shack half collapsed from rot. Nathan pushed the door open. Inside, the air was thick with mold and rust. He shone the flashlight along the walls, broken tools, empty fuel cans, a collapsed desk. Nothing. Then Atlas barked once, sharp and echoing. He was standing at the mouth of a cave behind the shack, half hidden by vines and stone. Nathan approached, heart quickening. The key in his pocket felt heavier now. Inside, the cave air was damp and cold. Water dripped from the ceiling, forming small pools on the ground. The beam of Nathan's light flickered across collapsed supports and slabs of limestone. The place smelled of iron and time. Atlas's claws clicked softly against the stone as he led the way, tail stiff. Halfway in, the dog stopped. He looked back at Nathan, then toward a narrow gap in the wall. He pawed the ground once, twice. Nathan crouched beside him and aimed the flashlight through the crevice. Metal glinted faintly beneath the debris. "You've got to be kidding me," he whispered. He set the light down and began clearing the rocks by hand. It took 20 minutes before he could reach it, a rectangular steel box, its lid eaten by rust but still sealed. The key Jensen had given him fit perfectly. Inside were dozens of folders wrapped in waxed cloth. Nathan peeled one open. The papers were brittle but legible. Building permits, bank receipts, land transfer deeds. Each bore the town's official seal and Langley's signature. At the bottom of every page was another name, Miles Cole. Nathan's chest tightened. His father's handwriting was there, the same looping script from the letters he used to leave on the kitchen table. Only now, beside every signature, were false valuations, forged approvals, proof that someone had forced him to sign off on fraudulent land acquisitions. The project name printed on every document read, Langley Land Redevelopment, Veteran Relief Zone. But instead of helping veterans rebuild, the documents showed land seized for private investors. This was never a redevelopment, Nathan said quietly. It was theft. Atlas whined, brushing against his arm. Nathan knelt, resting his hand on the dog's head. "You found it, buddy. You actually found it." He packed the files back into the box and shut the lid. As he stood, the flashlight flickered once, then died. The sound came a second later, a faint shuffle outside the cave. Then another. Nathan froze. "Atlas!" The shepherd's ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring. He growled low, stepping between Nathan and the cave entrance. A voice echoed faintly through the rocks. "You shouldn't have come here, Cole." Nathan's blood ran cold. He grabbed the box and backed towards the wall, eyes scanning the darkness. A figure appeared at the mouth of the cave, tall flashlight beam cutting across the walls. Another beam followed, then another. 3 of them. Atlas barked once, a thunderous sound that filled the cave. The men shouted, one raising his weapon. A muzzle flash lit the darkness. The gunshot exploded, ricocheting off the stone. Nathan dropped to the ground, clutching the box. The bullet tore past his shoulder, close enough to burn. Atlas lunged forward, a blur of muscle and fury. The second gunman fired, too late. The shepherd slammed into him, teeth sinking into his sleeve, dragging him down. Nathan's vision blurred, the sting of the wound numbing his arm. He fired back with Jensen's revolver, hitting the rock beside the attackers. Sparks flew, forcing them to duck. "Atlas, back!" The dog released the man, limping as a second shot grazed his hind leg. Nathan's breath caught. Blood streaked the dog's fur. "Come on, boy." He grabbed Atlas under the chest, half carrying him as they ran deeper into the cave. The tunnel curved sharply before opening toward a narrow exit that led out to the marsh below. The smell of salt and mud hit them as rain started to fall. Behind them, footsteps pounded closer. Nathan stumbled down the rocky slope, the box clutched to his chest, Atlas's weight heavy in his arm. Bullets cracked through the air, one slicing into the mud beside them. Nathan slipped, rolled, and hit the edge of the marsh hard. He grunted, pulling Atlas into the reeds. The dog whimpered softly but stayed quiet, his breathing shallow. Nathan pressed a hand over the wound. It was bleeding, but not deep. Flesh wound, thank God. "You're all right," he whispered. "You're tougher than any of them." They stayed there until the footsteps faded. Rain came harder now, washing the blood into the earth. Nathan looked toward the faint glow of the quarry lights in the distance. "They know what we found," he said, "and they're not done yet." Atlas lifted his head, eyes burning amber through the storm. Even hurt, he pushed his paw against Nathan's boot, as if to say move. Nathan nodded. "Yeah, we're going." He slung the metal box over his shoulder, lifted Atlas into his arms, and began the long walk across the marsh. The mud sucked at his boots, and the wind tore at his face, but he kept moving. Behind them, faint lights flickered at the quarry entrance. Someone searching, someone waiting. By the time they reached the cover of the trees, Nathan's arms burned, his shirt soaked through with blood and rain. He set Atlas down gently on the dry leaves, tearing a strip from his jacket to wrap the wound. The dog didn't flinch, only stared at him, calm, steady. "You saved my life again," Nathan said, voice shaking. Atlas blinked, his gaze holding steady, unyielding even through pain. Nathan looked back toward the quarry. The storm had swallowed it completely now, leaving only the faint sound of thunder rolling across the valley. He pressed a hand to the dog's fur. "We've got the proof. Now we just have to live long enough to use it." Atlas lowered his head onto Nathan's knee, eyes still open, guarding even as exhaustion pulled him under. Nathan sat beside him in the dark, the rain falling softer now, the truth they carried heavier than the night around them. The rain hadn't stopped in 2 days. It came down in thin, endless sheets that blurred the road and turned Asheville into a ghost town. Nathan parked the truck outside, the only cafe still open, the kind of place where the coffee was burnt and the gossip hotter. Atlas sat in the passenger seat, his leg bandaged, eyes following every movement on the sidewalk. He didn't bark anymore unless it mattered. Inside, the bell above the door jingled weakly. A woman sat alone by the window, hair tied back, glasses fogged from the steam. She looked up as Nathan entered, her face familiar from the articles that had once stirred half the county. "Lydia Monroe." "You're late," she said. "You're hard to find," he replied. She gestured to the chair opposite her. "People tend to disappear when they start digging in Asheville. Sit." He did. Atlas limped in after him, lying close enough to keep a paw on Nathan's boot. The dog's presence seemed to soften Lydia's guarded tone. "He's the one from the story, isn't he?" she asked quietly. Nathan nodded. "Atlas. He found what Langley was looking for." Lydia leaned forward. "You have the files?" Nathan slid the small waterproof bag onto the table. Inside were copies of the quarry documents, photos, deeds, financial transfers. Lydia's eyes widened as she scanned them. "These match the letters Langley sent me before he vanished. He claimed someone in the town office was forging property deeds, moving land from veterans' families to shell companies." "He was right," Nathan said. "And my father was forced to sign off on it." Lydia looked up sharply. "Your father?" "Miles Cole. He disappeared the same week as Langley." Something in her expression changed. Recognition. She opened her notebook and flipped through pages until she found an old clipping. It was a faded photo of two men at a town meeting, Langley at the podium, and beside him, Nathan's father. "He wasn't just forced," she said softly. "He tried to go public. Langley's last message to me mentioned a man named Cole, said he was the only one brave enough to help him prove it." The words hit Nathan like a punch to the chest. He sat back, the hum of the cafe fading under the weight of it. Atlas lifted his head, sensing the shift, pressing closer. Lydia continued, voice steady but low. "If we can publish this, it won't just clear their names. It'll bring the whole operation down." "Then let's do it," Nathan said. They spent the next 12 hours working in the old mansion, papers spread across the dining table, coffee mugs scattered among them. Atlas rested near the fireplace, eyes half closed but alert. Every now and then he'd rise, limp to the window, and stare out into the rain. Nathan noticed, but said nothing. By nightfall, Lydia had a full story drafted, her laptop glowing faintly in the darkened room. "Once this uploads, it's out of their hands," she said. "No one can bury it again." Nathan rubbed his temples. "You think they'll let us get that far?" Lydia glanced toward Atlas. "They didn't stop him before." Nathan smiled faintly. "He doesn't stop for much." Then the lights flickered. Once, twice. Out. The room fell into total darkness. The hum of the fridge died. The laptop screen went black. Even the clock on the wall stopped ticking. "What the hell?" Lydia whispered. She reached for her phone. No signal. Nathan moved to the window. The entire town beyond was dark. No street lights, no glow from houses, just the thick, suffocating black of a power grid deliberately killed. He knew the pattern. It was too coordinated, too precise. "They're cutting us off," he said. "Power, phone lines, probably internet next." Lydia grabbed her bag, panic rising. "We need to move the files. Wait." Nathan's voice dropped. "Listen." Atlas had risen from his spot by the door. His body stiffened, head tilted toward the woods. The rain had quieted to a whisper, but through it came another sound. Soft, rhythmic, deliberate. Footsteps on gravel. Atlas let out a low growl, deep and rolling, the kind that came from his chest like thunder. He moved toward the window, nose pressed to the glass, tail straight. Nathan grabbed the flashlight, switching it on, its beam slicing through the black. Nothing. Just the edge of the tree line swaying in the wind. Lydia's hand shook slightly. "Tell me that's just the storm." Nathan didn't answer. Atlas turned sharply toward the back of the house and barked once, explosive and sharp. Then again. "They're here," Nathan said quietly. He killed the flashlight, plunging them back into darkness. "Get the hard drives and the papers. We're not staying." Lydia moved fast, stuffing everything into a duffel. Outside, a car engine revved low, then cut off. Doors opened. Boots hit the ground. Atlas stood between Nathan and the back door, his silhouette tense, ears forward. The old soldier in him was awake now. He wasn't just guarding, he was calculating. Nathan crouched beside him, whispering into the dark. "Stay close, boy." A light flared outside, a flashlight beam sweeping the walls. Then another voice, muffled but confident. "We know you're in there, Cole. Hand it over, and maybe you'll walk out." Lydia froze. Nathan didn't move. Atlas growled again, lower this time, almost a vibration. He pressed forward until his nose nearly touched the doorframe. Nathan's voice was calm, but every muscle in his body coiled tight. "You said maybe. I don't like maybe." Outside, footsteps shifted closer. Gravel crunched. Metal clicked, the unmistakable sound of a safety being released. Lydia's whisper trembled. "What do we do?" Nathan's eyes stayed on Atlas. "We trust him." For a moment, time stopped. Then Atlas barked once, a deep, commanding sound that filled the air like a signal. Nathan moved. He grabbed Lydia by the wrist, pulling her towards the hallway just as glass shattered behind them. The first shot tore through the window, splintering the wooden frame. Atlas leapt toward the noise, teeth bared, fury in motion. Nathan dragged Lydia toward the basement door. "Go, he'll follow." But when he turned back, Atlas was still at the window, growling at the dark figures outside, blood and rain glinting in the broken light. Nathan shouted, but the dog didn't retreat. He wasn't afraid. He was holding the line. The next shot echoed through the storm. Lydia screamed. Nathan ran back through the dark, heart pounding, knowing before he even saw the shape on the floor that something had changed. Atlas was down, but alive. His eyes met Nathan's through the rain-streaked glass, calm and certain. Nathan pressed a hand to his chest, voice shaking. "You did good, buddy. You did damn good." Outside, the figures melted into the night. The car engine roared back to life, fading into the storm. Nathan lifted Atlas gently, his arms trembling. Lydia stood frozen in the doorway, tears streaking down her face. "They tried to erase it again," she whispered. Nathan met her gaze, fury and grief intertwined. "Then we make it louder." Atlas shifted in his arms, breathing ragged but steady. His eyes stayed open, locked on the window, on the darkness that had once again come for the truth. But this time, it had met its match. The night came down like a curtain, thick, wet, and heavy with silence. The house at the edge of Ashvale stood alone, its windows boarded, its walls trembling in the wind. Nathan checked the locks again, hands moving with precision. The rifle on the table was old but clean, a leftover from his service days. Lydia worked beside him, her face pale but determined as she sealed the last envelope of files, ready to send if they didn't make it. Atlas lay near the front door, head low, eyes glowing faint amber in the flicker of candlelight. Every few seconds, his ears twitched towards the woods. He didn't rest. He was listening, to the ground, the rain, the quiet that wasn't really quiet. "They'll come before dawn," Nathan said, loading the last round. Lydia swallowed hard. "How can you be sure?" He looked at Atlas. "Because he knows." As if on cue, Atlas rose to his feet, muscles tensing. He turned his head toward the back field and let out a low, warning growl. The sound crawled through the house like a fuse burning toward an explosion. Nathan moved to the window and saw the faint glow of headlights, 4, maybe 5 vehicles cutting through the mist. They stopped just short of the tree line. "They're here," he whispered. Lydia clutched the duffel of documents. "What do we do?" Nathan's eyes hardened. "We hold the line." The first shot cracked through the night, shattering the upper window. Wood splintered. Lydia ducked. Nathan grabbed her arm, pulling her behind the heavy desk. Atlas barked once, short, sharp, a soldier's signal, and bolted toward the side door. "Atlas, flank!" Nathan ordered. The dog veered left, disappearing into the dark. Outside, shadows moved through the rain. They weren't amateurs. Tactical vests, night vision goggles, silenced rifles. Whoever sent them wanted this clean, quiet, untraceable. But Atlas didn't do quiet. A scream erupted near the porch, followed by a thud. One of the gunmen hit the ground, clutching his arm as Atlas's shape blurred through the gloom. Another man turned, aiming wildly, only for Nathan to fire first. The rifle kicked once, and silence returned except for the rain. Lydia stared, shaken. "You used to be military?" "Not exactly," Nathan said flatly. "Just someone who stopped trusting orders." The assault paused. They were regrouping. Atlas returned through the back door, limping slightly but alert, fur soaked and teeth bared. Nathan crouched beside him, checking the wound. It wasn't fresh, just reopened from the chase. "You good?" he whispered. Atlas pressed his head briefly against Nathan's knee, as if answering, then turned back towards the door. The next wave came harder. Flashbangs shattered the night. The explosions tore through the hallway, blowing open the front entry. Smoke filled the room. Lydia coughed, eyes burning. Nathan pulled her into the kitchen, overturned the table, and took cover. "Stay down!" he shouted. Atlas burst from the smoke, leaping through the broken window to circle the house. Nathan moved with him, timing their rhythm like they'd trained together for years. Every growl, every step from Atlas became a signal. The dog flushed out enemies hiding by the vehicles, while Nathan used the distraction to take their cover fire apart, one burst at a time. By the time the gunfire slowed, 3 men were down. 2 fled toward the woods. 1 remained, cornered behind the pickup truck. Nathan advanced carefully, gun raised, rain slicking his hair against his forehead. "Drop it!" he yelled. The man hesitated, then tossed his weapon aside. When Nathan yanked him forward into the light, he froze. It wasn't just another hired thug, it was Deputy Mayor Raymond Brooks. Nathan's expression darkened. "You've got to be kidding me." Brooks's hands trembled. "You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to go this far." "Oh, I understand plenty," Nathan said coldly. "You've been running Langley's old redevelopment scheme, laundering millions through land stolen from veterans. My father signed those papers under duress. You made him disappear when he started asking questions." Brooks shook his head wildly. "I didn't kill anyone. I just did what I was told. I had orders from above. The council, the investors. They said it was for the good of the town." Atlas limped closer, circling the man, teeth flashing in the rain. Brooks flinched, pressing his back against the truck. "Call him off." Nathan didn't. "You've got one chance. Tell me who's behind it." Brooks's voice broke. "You don't get it. You go after them and you'll vanish just like Langley did. Just like your father." Nathan stared for a long moment, then reached into his coat. Brooks tensed, expecting a gun. But Nathan pulled out the file, thick, damp from the rain, sealed with evidence. He tossed it onto the ground between them. "There," Nathan said. "Everything they need to bury you or save you. Depends on what you do next." Brooks looked down, confused. "What is this?" "Your second chance," Nathan replied. "Turn yourself in, tell the truth, because after tonight, no one's coming to save you." Brooks stared at the folder, shaking. Then, without warning, the woods lit up, flashes from car headlights. More vehicles, sirens faint but rising. Lydia ran from the porch, shouting, "Nathan! County police! They must have picked up the gunfire!" Nathan turned. Brooks took his chance. He bolted toward the tree line. Atlas lunged, but Nathan caught his collar. "No," he said quietly. "Let him go." The dog hesitated, then eased back, panting hard. Nathan looked at Lydia. "If he's smart, he'll hand over that file before they find him. If not—" He didn't finish. The police arrived minutes later, guns drawn, flashlights cutting across the soaked yard. But Nathan and Lydia were already packing up the last of their things. The power was still out, the phone lines still dead. Inside, the old house smelled of gunpowder and rain. Nathan crouched beside Atlas, checking his leg again. "You did good," he whispered. "You always do." Atlas leaned into his touch, tail flicking once against the floor. Outside, an officer shouted that backup was on the way, that the town was on lockdown until sunrise. Nathan didn't answer. He was looking past the flashing lights, toward the mountains on the horizon, toward whatever came next. For now, the siege was over, but the war for the truth had just begun. Atlas lifted his head toward the sound of distant thunder, alert once more, as if he too understood that the night had not finished testing them. The morning after the siege, the first headline hit the national networks. Corruption buried beneath 50-cent mansion, the Ashvale Files. It spread faster than anyone expected. Lydia Monroe's article didn't just reveal the truth, it detonated it. Photos of the old stone mansion, of the forged deeds, and of the officials' names appeared on every screen from Washington to Los Angeles. Brooks was arrested before sunrise, dragged from a motel room outside of town, his face pale, his lips trembling as he told reporters, "I only did what I was told." By noon, half the county courthouse was sealed off. Investigators poured in. Politicians denied involvement. People who had once looked away now lined the streets demanding answers. Nathan watched it unfold on a small TV in his kitchen. The sound of reporters echoed faintly through the static. He didn't smile. He just sat quietly, a cup of black coffee cooling beside him. Atlas lay by the window, head resting on his paws, eyes half closed. The bandage on his leg was gone now, replaced by a faint scar. He still limped when he walked, but there was peace in his movements, as if the weight he carried all those years had finally lifted. Lydia entered, carrying a stack of mail. "You're officially famous," she said. "Half the country wants interviews." "I'm not talking to anyone," Nathan replied. "I figured," she said with a faint grin. "But there's one letter I think you should open." She handed him a cream-colored envelope stamped with an official seal. "The Veterans Alliance of the United States." Inside was a single sheet, typed in formal lines but signed by hand at the bottom. Nathan read silently. When he looked up, his expression was unreadable. "They want to buy the house." "Buy it?" Lydia asked. He nodded. "Turn it into a memorial, a place for the records, the truth, and the people who never got to tell their side." Lydia's eyes softened. "Ashvale Truth Memorial. It has a ring to it." Nathan looked out the window where the old mansion stood under the grey light. "It started as a lie. Maybe it can end as something honest." For the first time in a long time, Lydia saw him smile. Not a wide grin, just that quiet kind of peace that comes when a man finally sets something right. A week later, the dedication ceremony drew dozens of veterans, families, and townsfolk. The mansion had been restored, but left simple. Stone walls scrubbed, broken windows replaced, and the basement sealed except for one display, the original steel box that Atlas had found at the quarry. Nathan stood at the back, watching as the local news covered the event. Beside the podium stood Sheriff Eric Langley, the missing mayor's son. The resemblance was unmistakable. Same steady eyes, same quiet authority. When the crowd hushed, Langley stepped forward. 27 years ago, my father disappeared trying to expose corruption. Today, thanks to a man who refused to stay silent, we close that chapter." His gaze drifted toward Nathan. "And we open a new one." Applause rippled through the crowd, but Nathan stayed still, one hand resting on Atlas's back. The dog's fur had turned silver around the muzzle. His breathing was slower, but his posture remained proud. He wasn't the soldier he once was, but then again, neither was Nathan. After the ceremony, Langley approached him. "I wanted to thank you," he said quietly. "My father wrote about a surveyor named Cole in his final notes. He said, if I disappear, he'll know where to look." Nathan met his gaze. "I didn't. Not until it was almost too late." Langley shook his head. "No, you did exactly when it mattered." He handed Nathan a folded piece of paper, an old photograph. It showed 3 men standing on a hill above Ashvale, Mayor Langley, Miles Cole, and a young boy with a crooked smile. Nathan stared at it for a long time before speaking. "I was there that day," he said softly. "I just didn't remember until now." Langley smiled faintly. Some truths take years to surface, but they always find their way home. That night, after the guests left and the last cameras turned off, Nathan walked the mansion's halls one final time. The smell of stone and rain lingered. He paused by the basement door, the same one where Atlas had first barked at something invisible in the dark. He whispered, "We did it, boy." Atlas, now slow but still alert, followed him outside into the fading light. They stopped at the garden where the memorial plaque stood, engraved with the words, "Truth is the only foundation that never crumbles." Nathan sat on the steps, watching the sky bleed into gold and violet. Atlas lay beside him, sighing softly as the wind brushed through his fur. Lydia joined them with 2 cups of coffee. She sat quietly for a while before saying, "You could leave, you know. Start over somewhere quiet." "I am quiet," Nathan said. "You're staying?" He nodded. "This house still needs a guardian." He looked down at Atlas, who blinked slowly, content. And so does he. Lydia smiled, sipping her coffee. "Then I guess Ashvale's finally in good hands." The crickets began to sing, and for the first time in decades, the mansion didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt alive, reborn through the truth it had once tried to bury. As the stars appeared, Nathan leaned back against the cold stone wall, eyes closing. Atlas shifted, resting his head on Nathan's boot, a gesture he had done since the first day they met. And there, under the whisper of the night, soldier and dog sat in peace, keepers of a truth no one could bury again. A full year had passed since the Ashvale Truth Memorial opened its doors. What had once been an abandoned mansion bought for 50 cents now stood as a place of history, healing, and quiet power. The air smelled of cedar and rain. The stone walls that once hid secrets now carried echoes of school children, reporters, and veterans who came to pay respect. That morning, a yellow school bus rolled up the dirt road and stopped near the old gate. A teacher led a group of children toward the memorial steps, their shoes crunching against the gravel. The bronze statue on the porch gleamed in the soft morning light, a life-size shepherd, alert and noble, gazing toward the horizon. One small boy stopped and pointed up at it. "Is that the dog from the story?" he asked, eyes wide with curiosity. Nathan Cole, older now, his beard streaked with grey, stood a few feet away, trimming the flowers near the path. He looked up, smiling faintly. "Yeah," he said softly. "That's Atlas." The boy tilted his head. "Did he really save people?" Nathan walked over, wiping his hands on his jeans. "He didn't save people the way you see in movies," he said. "He saved the truth. That's harder." The boy frowned, thinking it over. "How can a dog save the truth?" Nathan's smile deepened. "By never giving up on it." He pointed to the plaque below the statue, engraved in clean, simple letters. "He didn't bark for food. He barked for the truth." The children stood silent for a moment, reading. The wind moved gently through the trees, carrying the smell of pine and earth. Inside the memorial, the walls were lined with framed documents, the same files Atlas had found in the quarry, now carefully preserved behind glass. In the center of the main hall hung a photo of Nathan and Atlas, both standing in the rain the night justice came to Ashvale. Visitors walked quietly, some wiping their eyes. For them, this wasn't just about one man or one town. It was about what happens when ordinary people and one extraordinary dog refuse to look away. Later, when the visitors left and the gates closed, Nathan stepped out onto the porch. He looked across the field where the sunrise spilled gold over the valley. Under the old oak near the house lay Atlas, now too old to run, but still alert in his own quiet way. His fur was silver, his breath slower, his eyes softer. But the same light still burned there, steady and knowing. Nathan knelt beside him, resting a hand on his neck. "Busy day, huh, partner?" Atlas's tail thumped once against the grass. He didn't lift his head. He didn't need to. His gaze followed the birds overhead, the ones that always landed near the statue, as if they knew this place belonged to peace. Nathan sat beside him in silence. "You know," he said after a while, "they keep asking how a dog could change a town. I tell them the truth's a lot like a scent. You just have to keep tracking it, even when everyone else walks away." Atlas blinked slowly, his chest rising and falling. "Rest easy now," Nathan whispered. "You've done your job." He stayed there until the light shifted and the shadows stretched long across the grass. The wind picked up again, brushing through the oak leaves, making them whisper like an old story retold 1,000 times. As evening came, a soft bell rang from the memorial tower, the one the veterans group installed to honor those who'd fought for truth in their own ways. It tolled 3 times, echoing through the valley. Each note carried warmth instead of sorrow. Later that night, the caretaker found Nathan still sitting beneath the oak, Atlas sleeping soundly beside him. The stars reflected faintly in the shepherd's half-closed eyes. By morning, the visitors would return. They'd see the statue, the files, the name plates. They'd ask the same question. Is that the dog from the story? And Nathan would smile again, the same quiet smile of a man who'd lived long enough to know that some guardians never stop watching. As the camera pulled back, the house stood proud under the dawn, its windows glowing, its door open to the world. The statue of Atlas caught the first rays of sunlight, turning his bronze eyes to gold. The screen faded to black, with the final words carved in stone. He didn't bark for food. He barked for the truth. Then, over the gentle sound of wind through the trees, a voice echoed softly. Nathan's voice, steady and low. Every loyal dog guards something, a home, a person, sometimes even a truth. What's your story with a loyal pet? The credits rolled slowly, and beneath them the call to action appeared on the screen. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, redemption, and the dogs who never stopped guarding the truth. Follow the German Shepherd channel, where every bark has a story.